Hello, everyone. This is James Avalon for USNN. I'm here with Tim Preuss. So I probably butchered your name.
You did. You butchered my name. Although it's better because there are horrible hybrid cars called Priuses,
Yeah.
the Toyota Prius, and a lot of people pronounce my name Prius, but it's it's Preuss. Preuss as in Prussia.
All right. So our first topic, as you've been hearing probably over there, North Korea. You've seen the US has been having some trouble with them.
Yeah. I don't know that it's necessarily like the U.S. is having trouble with North Korea. I think that there are overwhelming we view things differently. And I was actually just thinking about this maybe a few hours ago, and in regards to North Korea, where imagine that you broke up with a girl, right?
Yeah.
You moved on. You know, you've been dating a few other girls over the years, but she hasn't dated anyone else since you. So in her mind, you're that one. You're the one that got away. And in her mind, you're the biggest thing. And in your mind, she's just freaking part of history. That's the kind of the way North Korea is. And that's like, since we had this giant Korean War in the 1950s and 60s, then that was, we broke up with North Korea, or we broke up with, and since then they've been almost completely isolated. So in their mind, they're trying to get back into a relationship with the rest of the world, but the rest of the world has moved on since then. So I actually did a 10-minute just kind of brief overview of North Korea. And what's interesting about North Korea is that they're not necessarily they're completely shut off from the rest of the world. Like, we have to remember that. So what happened in the Korean War, to them, that happened yesterday. To us, it happened 50 years ago. To them, it happened yesterday. They don't forget that. They also don't forget about different things that had happened centuries ago between them and the Japanese, or American. We sent different ships over there to try to conquer parts of Korea, and we were shot at, and Americans died and Koreans died, but more Koreans died than Americans. They remember that. They remember that as if it were yesterday. So that's the kind of mindset that they're coming at this from. And I think that's important to kind of take into account when we're dealing with foreign policy as well. Yes, we, ultimately we want a safe world where no one is attacking anyone. On the other hand, we still have to take into account what angle are they coming at it from. And North Korea is coming at it at a angle that no one else in the world is coming at it from. So I don't know if there's a real solution. Right now they're threatening to send a nuke at Guam, and they now supposedly have the ability to basically launch intercontinental ballistic missiles at the United States. And it's like, well, if they do, then they can try. I don't think they will, though, because North Korea knows. And going back, Kim Jong-un is the third generation of Kims, right? That's their in Asia, that's their last name. Their last name is Kim. They're not. Kim Jong-un knows that if he were to launch a nuclear strike at America, that he would be decimated. He knows that he would be wiped off the face of the earth. So he's not going to do it. Like, he's threatening it. And I think the reason he's threatening it is that he's been left out of really kind of world affairs for so long, and no one takes him seriously. No one's doing trade with him. He doesn't have ambassadors all over the world like every other country does. And, it's almost kind of sad, like I've talked to people who live in those areas. I have a very close friend who lives in Japan. And I say, well, as far as Japan goes, are they afraid of North Korea attacking them? And he says, like, well, not so much. The real concern is that North Korea might launch a nuclear weapon and then it would accidentally hit Japan. That's their concern. Not that North Korea would deliberately do it, but that they would accidentally do it. So, when you take that into account, it's like, okay, no one's really concerned that they're going to deliberately hurt someone in their region. They're more concerned that they're going to accidentally hurt someone when they launch one of these tests. So, knowing people in that part of the world and knowing the history of North Korea, I think is really pretty vital. And if we get to that point, then we can kind of almost brush it off. There isn't a good solution. What is the solution? We take Kim Jong-un out of power by doing what? Bombing Pyongyang? Well, then we're going to kill, a few million people.
Yeah.
So is a few million people worth the freedom of the other few million people? I don't know. There's not a good solution to it.
Yeah, I was thinking about this the other night, and I think on your perspective, if it got that bad, you'd have to say to yourself, well, it's them or us, and just think, those few million lives would save, tens of millions in the US. It may get to that stage.
Yeah, if it came to that stage, then yeah, we'd have that kind of principle where we'd say, well, we're going to kill all of you so that you don't kill one of us, and that's kind of the nature of war. I don't know that North Korea or Kim Jong-un is willing to actually sacrifice that, though. He's not going to strike us for no reason. This is just a big show so that North Korea can be in the news again. They don't have, it's really hard. And I struggled with it for a long time. It's really hard to imagine a world where everyone else is completely cut off from you. Imagine, you're from Britain, I'm from America. Imagine if Britain did not have any contact with any of the European nations. It didn't have any contact with North America or in South America. It didn't have any contact with Asia. And now you're trying to wage a war. How do you it's mind-boggling to think that you would say, well, I'm going to launch an attack on one of them. Like the whole freaking rest of the world is going to gang up on you and beat the shit out of you. Yeah. So it's not a winnable strategy for Kim Jong-un, and I think he knows that. The Korean people, Korea in general, has the highest average IQ of any population in the world. So they're not dumb. They know what they're doing, and they're not going to purposely destroy themselves. And that's what a strike would actually do. If they strike America, America will wipe them off of the face of the earth. And they know that, and they won't do it. So I don't really view it as a major threat.
Yeah, I tend to agree. The people in North Korea, I'm not sure they're self-aware of. I think they genuinely do believe that their nation is the best. Like they say on TV. They're so confident that they could wipe America off. But obviously it's not true. But then you sort of think, are they saying that because they're afraid to be shot, or are they saying because they genuinely do believe it?
I don't know that they do. I think they're almost forced to pretend they believe that. Like, North Korea is extremely isolated from the rest of the world, but they're not so isolated that they don't know what the rest of the world is. They know that the rest of the world has it better than them. And because people have come from other parts of the world and been in their societies. Like we have American journalists that go into North Korea and they talk to North Koreans. Now, at the end of the day, the North Koreans are going to say, yes, we have this this great society, but they're paid to say that. If they say that North Korea isn't great, they're going to be killed. And they have weird kind of systems set up where, I don't know if it's every day or every week, but North Koreans basically have to, what's the word? They have to go against their brothers, they have to be narcs. Every week, North Koreans have to be narcs, and they have to say something bad that their neighbor did. So if every week you are obligated to say something that your neighbor did wrong, none of those neighbors are going to actually go against the government because they know that would be death for them. And not just death for them, it would be death for their entire family. And that's the problem we have, is that we have a lot of innocent people who would want to rebel, but they can't. If one person rebels, like, just think of, I'm in my own situation. Let's say I wanted to rebel against America. I said, the American government has become too tyrannic and I want to rebel against it. What's going to happen is that they will kill everyone that I know and love. Am I willing to sacrifice that? Most people aren't. Like, who would? The people who escape North Korea, their families are then killed, or they're put into brutal work camps. So people don't want to escape because they don't want to sacrifice their families because they love them. And there's no real good solution. Like, what we can do is, I think, is actually open up trade and open up communication so that we can have diplomatic relations with these countries, because bombs aren't going to solve it. We can certainly talk with people. We can, we can trade with them, and trade is going to raise their standard of living. And I think once people's standard of living is rising and rising and rising, then they're going to be a more free, and they're going to be more democratic, and we're going to have a better situation for everyone. But in the meantime, there's nothing we can do. War is not going to solve this. I really hope that it doesn't go down that path, because it's going to mean the death of millions of innocent people. And that's the majority of North Koreans. Even the North Koreans who are in the army, they don't want to be in the army. So, but they will, and they will try to kill us if they're ordered to kill us. So war is not the answer. Like, yeah, we can win a war with North Korea. And no Americans, for the most part, maybe a few thousand in Guam, no one's going to die from North Korea. But I would rather that we spare the lives of those millions of innocent who are in North Korea and work out some sort of diplomatic solution. And I think it's definitely possible. And sanctions placed on them, and trade restrictions placed on them, and all of that stuff that's happened for the last 50 years, since the Korean War, we've had these different sanctions on them. It hasn't helped them, and it really hasn't helped us. And, we could take the same case with Cuba. Cuba is, they're communist or whatever. Well, let's open. And for years and years and years, we had an embargo on Cuba. Americans could not fly to Cuba. You'd have to fly to Mexico and then fly to Cuba if you wanted to go to Cuba. But who did that help? It didn't help the Cubans. It didn't help the Americans. So let's open up relations. And it's like, I try to take everything back to an individual kind of position and say, well, if I said you're not allowed to be the friend of that other person, then you're never going to be their friend. But if I said I don't care, then you might end up being their friend. And that would be better for all of us, because then we'd all have more friends. And there's no reason that we can't be friends with the North Koreans, honestly.
I'm not too sure. Like, would Kim Jong-un sit down with the Americans? Would it be viewed as weak by his people, or I'm not too sure. Would he do it?
Well, there's no way to really tell, because we're not in that situation right now, and we've gotten so overburdened with, basically militarism and who's the top dog, and North Korea is trying to threaten the rest of the world, but they're it's like a dog, right? Like you've seen dogs that are very, you try to, like a stray dog. And in America, we have all these different kinds of like animal rescue shows. I don't know if you have them in Britain, but they find dogs who have been abused and they're very afraid of humans. So when they try to pet them, they're aggressive. It doesn't mean that they're mean. It doesn't mean that they're innately aggressive towards humans. It means that they're so afraid of you that they're going to attack you. I think that's kind of the position North Korea is in, where it's a dog who has been abused for decades, and it's afraid of everyone else, so it lashes out as opposed to being pet. So it's just it's a matter of, and it's so hard because we have human beings running countries. This is why I'm opposed to governments entirely. Why we shouldn't have government, because if I want to do trade with a North Korean, or if I want to talk to a North Korean, why should the government, whether it's the American government or the North Korean government, why should they have any say in that? It should just be me talking to another individual. And North Korea is a prime example of why governments don't work. And North Korea is the supreme government, where they control every aspect of their people's lives. And we see how terrible that is for the people. And the more we move in that direction, the more the left pushes us in that direction, then the closer we actually are to North Korea.
Oh, I tend to agree. Yeah. So is there anything else you want to say on that?
Nothing else I really have to say on North Korea. Not not at this point, no.
Yeah. What else do we have lined up? Multiculturalism, yes.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one. Yes. Multiculturalism. It's multiculturalism hasn't been defined, right? Like most people, when they think multiculturalism, they're going to think, well, in America, we have people who are Mexican, and they can have fiestas and wear sombreros and drink tequila, and that's fine. And we can have our own different kind of Oktoberfests, whereas all the people who are of German descent, they'll drink beer and they'll wear their lederhosen and all of that kind of thing. And that's the nice kind of multiculturalism, where we all basically get along, and it's fine. Like no one really cares. Like my next door neighbors are Mexican. They speak Spanish and English, and they're really cool people. Like, every time, like if I'm standing outside and I see them go by, I give them the peace sign and he gives me the peace sign. He's like, hey, what's up? That's what's, so I don't mind people who have different cultures. So we have to say, well, multicultural. Well, what do we mean by culture? Do we mean what values do they want? And I view culture and values as completely separate. You can have a different culture than me. Like you can be from Mexico, and you can speak Spanish, and you can grill out differently than I do, and you can eat different food than I do, and you can listen to this. It's strange. It's like a polka. It's like a Spanish polka music that they love. And I don't care. Like I get along with them, like I was, chatting with them on the 4th of July, America's Independence Day. And that's totally fine. I like margaritas. That's the good part of that's what culture is. Then when we talk about values, and that's the divide that I think a lot of people are coming to, is that there's a difference between multiculturalism and valuism. And multi-valuism doesn't work, because I value liberty for the individual. I value property rights, and I value equality under the law. That isn't the same in certain areas of the world. So we have to kind of separate those two and say, yeah, if you're Islamic and you want to put a stupid mat on your floor and pray to Mecca 5 times a day, like I don't really care. If you're Jewish and you want to wear that little thing that they have on their
Skull cap, isn't it?
I don't even know what it is.
I think it's a skull.
Or a yarmulke. That's what it is.
Yeah.
I don't care. Like I have Jewish friends, I have Muslim friends, and I have Christian friends, and I have atheist friends. Like, I don't really care. Once your values start to go against mine as far as liberty for the individual, property rights, and equality under the law, that's when we start having a problem. So, as far as multiculturalism goes, I just say, well, what are we talking about? Like, that's the first kind of stance you have to take, is say, define multicultural. What is it? And most people will say multicultural versus multi-value. And we have the real problem we have is the people who want to believe in multi-value. And that's the problem. Multi-value. Multiculturalism is not a problem. Multi-valuism is a problem.
Yeah. I'd say the US, it is a prime example of how multiculturalism has worked in some instances. With your case with the neighbours, it's worked quite well. In fact, everyone comes to the US from around the world, assimilates, and gets along. But it's just some groups don't. In the UK, we've seen that quite a lot, and I think if you hadn't elected Trump, it was gonna happen. The same thing was gonna happen.
Yeah, and I don't know that Trump is actually really going to do anything. Like he's the president, and he gives a nice, he's the figurehead. But he's not in charge of a whole lot. Constitutionally speaking, the president of the United States can't really do much, unfortunately. Fortunate or better, for better or worse, the president of the United States, he doesn't write laws. He execute laws that Congress wrote. So, his powers are pretty restrained. And yeah, but what had happened in Britain, you had so many basically violent Islamic people, refugees pouring into the country, and the British people said, this is overwhelming. We can't take this anymore, and we're going to get apart from this European Union nonsense and be our own country. I applauded that, and I was happy for it, and I didn't have a prediction of whether it would or wouldn't happen, because there were differing reports, like different polls say different things. But when it did happen, I was like, good for Britain, like good for you, like just saying, yeah. And I would say the same thing if certain states in America broke off, like one of the most, the biggest, strongest states in America is Texas. So if Texas said, we're going to secede from the rest of the United States, I would be all for them, like I'd be very happy for them and say, ultimately, if you're in favor of Britain leaving the European Union, then you should be in favor of London leaving Britain, which means you should be in favor of certain boroughs of London leaving London. And then you'd be in favor of certain neighborhoods within those boroughs leaving those boroughs. And ultimately, you'd be in favor of the individual seceding from the overall state. So I think logically that, anarchy works really perfectly. And if you're in favor of Brexit, or if you're in favor of Texas seceding from the United States, then you actually, if you follow that line of logic down, then you would be in favor of complete anarchy. And that's the individual is only responsible to the individual.
I guess you're sort of right, but it depends why you voted for Brexit, really. One of the reasons I voted was so we can make our own laws. We're ruled by European courts. And I guess that sort of links into individualism. But yeah, I can see where you're going, but
yeah, it's strange. Austrian economy, anarchist philosophy, but I think it works out.
Yeah.
Even though I live in America, where we have a giant government that, the American government dictates what kind of light bulbs we can have, and what kind of toilets we can have. Like we have special regulated toilets that only use so much water in the toilets, and it's bizarre, right? Like, who cares how much? And they say, well, we're trying to conserve water. I'm like, well, but if I have to flush 2 or 3 times, well, then it doesn't really conserve water. It's a joke. But that's what happens when you get bureaucracies involved in people's lives, is that bureaucracies slow things down and they make things more expensive, and people's lives are worsened because they have to pay more and they have to wait longer, and they get crappier products at the end of the day. So I hate government. I wish government was as unintrusive as possible.
Yeah. So, would you say you're anarchist then? Just to clear things up.
Yeah, probably. I don't personally like go out and say I'm an anarchist, because then people get like different ideas in their mind where they think anarchy and they think chaos and they think there's no rules and they think, like the world is burning if there was anarchy.
Yeah,
and so I think anarchy as in I don't want government. That doesn't mean that I don't want rules. So
how would the rules be enforced, though?
The same. We have many rules in society that are not enforced by government, right? Like there's plenty of things that are perfectly legal, but people don't do because of societal norms. So society can enforce people, enforce a rule on people without necessarily being illegal. And I think that's the exact same way that an anarchist society would work, where even if murder, if there was no government, then we would say that murder is technically legal because there's no law against it. That doesn't mean that people are going to go around murdering people because they are afraid of someone else coming back and murdering them. So they're going to behave. It goes back to that golden rule, and it seems completely oversimplified, but I think that as far as political discussions, we should really take it back to really simplistic values. The golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. I'm not going to hurt you. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to, steal from you. I'm not going to kill you. And I would expect the same from you. And that actually works. That's what real society is based on. We don't have a civil society because of government. We had civilizations and we had people cooperating and working together and living peacefully in the same area. We had that before we had an actual government. So we don't need, like, people kind of have it confused. Like they think that because we have government, we have roads. We had roads before we had government. Like, how did we discover the alphabet? How do we discover language? Government did not invent language. Humans, through their own voluntary action, interacting with each other, invented a language. It wasn't government. So we can come up with all of these great things without a government. It's only later that government came about and then starts to say that, well, if it wasn't for government, we wouldn't have roads. We had roads before we had government. That's ridiculous. The free market has given us the internet. The free market has given us iPhones and computers and all sorts of different things, but we're led to believe that only the government can provide us with roads, like a flat piece of pavement. Only government can do that? Voluntary individuals can't do that? That's insane. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from, and we do differ on. I would not describe myself as an anarchist in any way. My opinion's always been the government shouldn't intrude on their citizens' lives too much, but a state is needed, just to keep everything under control and keep everything going.
Yeah, and I think I was probably in your position, a few years ago. Probably more than a few years ago. I'm an oldie now, but I thought that government should only be involved in the things that only government can do. Only government can do national defense. Only government can do roads and police and fire departments and those kinds of things. And then as I read more and more and more, I realized that government doesn't actually do any of those things particularly well. You know, they don't do fire particularly well. They don't do policing particularly well. And in the areas where they failed in policing, the private sector has actually picked up and invented private police forces. Private security companies have risen, and they're doing a better job than the police are. And even national defense is a complete blunder. If we look at Vietnam and we say, when the government was in charge of American relations between America and Vietnam, we had war and we had a lot of bad stuff going on. Then we ended the war and private enterprise came into the picture, and now we're completely peaceful with it. So, like even in national policy and foreign policy and different things, private enterprise works far better than government does. I don't know if there's a single industry, and I'm not saying that there is absolutely no role for government. It's just that I haven't figured one out. So that's why I don't say I'm an anarchist, but ultimately I don't believe in a state, and part of that is I broke it down over a long period of time. And if I described like our natural rights, and John Locke talked about this, and I'm a huge fan of John Locke. He talked about the right to life, the right to liberty, and the right to property. Government can only exist if it violates your right to property, right? Yeah. Like it has to steal from you, which is violating your rights, in order to establish itself. So therefore, government in and of itself, it cannot exist if it doesn't violate your fundamental natural rights. And therefore I said, well, government is completely immoral. Like the institution itself is immoral. The government cannot exist if it does not violate your rights, and violating your rights is immoral. So therefore, government is immoral. We should not have a government. Government is immoral.
I think you made some good points there. Should we move on to the Google memo?
Oh, right. Yeah. You'll have to refresh me on it a little bit. Like I had heard about it. I had discussed this issue, the Google memo. I don't know if I discussed the Google memo itself or just a few other, articles that were about how sexist Silicon Valley was, because, there are only so many women per so many men, and that's clearly sexist. And then the Google memo, at least from what I understand, I didn't read the full text of it, but from what I've gathered, is saying the reason there's fewer women in Silicon Valley or in the technology industry is because women aren't interested in it. They're not interested in it. Why is this controversial? Like we also have fewer male teachers in elementary school. That does not mean that elementary schools are sexist against men. It means that men prefer, if they're going to be educators, prefer high school or college. Like it's one of those things where we can't just accept that there are differences between the sexes, and differences between them does not mean that there is some sort of discrimination or that there is some sort of wrong being done. Just because people are different doesn't mean that someone is hurting one person or another person. If I walked up to two people living on an island and one person had $4 and one person had $1, it's not right for me to just automatically assume that the person that has $4 stole some of those dollars from the person who had $1. It's completely inane. It doesn't make sense. And it's a stupid issue, one that does not make sense, and it's too bad that all these people who are taking like women's studies and all of that, they don't take courses in logic. Like maybe you should take some courses in history or biology or all of these different subjects that would completely refute feminist theories, because feminism is garbage. Like I love women. I would assume you love women as well.
Yeah, yeah,
And
straight.
we all have mothers, and a lot of us have sisters or sisters-in-law or nieces, and it's not like I think less of them. I have a niece and I have a nephew. I actually have two nieces and a nephew. I don't think that the niece is less of a person because she's a girl. No one actually thinks that. It's nonsense. And they say, well, it's not actual feminism. It's institutional. It's not sexism. It's institutional sexism. And like, well, you have to break it down and find me a case where there is a guy who is deliberately discriminating against women because they are women. That doesn't actually exist. So because it doesn't actually exist, we can't legislate against it. We can't pass laws. We can't make court cases and make precedent on it. It's a whole load of nonsense.
Yeah, I'd say it's true. I've always joked about, you've heard about these petitions and campaigns to have more women in tech and law, or tech in particular. More gays in tech, more women in tech. You've heard about this?
Yeah, and that would be easy to do if more women were actually applying for it.
Yeah.
So really, if anyone's to blame for the lack of women in technology, it's women. Like, women aren't applying for these jobs. Women aren't getting degrees in these subjects. So, as let's just say I'm Mark Zuckerberg, I would love to hire 1 million extra women. Turns out they're not there. They don't exist. So how can you blame Silicon Valley for not hiring enough women when women themselves are choosing not to be in that industry? That's not their fault. And it's silly because they only look at Silicon Valley. They look at the industries that are very profitable and that are glamorized. They don't look at the dirty industries like coal mining. Coal mining is probably 90% of people who work in the coal industry are men. So why aren't they complaining about that? Right? Like, if you're going to complain about not enough women being in Silicon Valley based on, 50-50, it should be 50-50. Turns out it isn't. Well, what about coal mining? Should be 50-50. They don't complain about not enough women being into coal mining. They don't complain about not enough women being lumberjacks chopping down trees in the middle of forests. They don't complain about not enough women being in the middle of the ocean catching fish. They only complain about these nice, kind of the glamorous jobs. They don't complain about, and that just kind of throws away their whole argument. There's like, well, if you really want equality, then we should have more women going into coal mining. And they would say, well, women don't want to do that. And that's the exact same argument we say with technology. Women don't want to be in technology. Like, some women do, and guess what? They're hired. But there aren't enough women that want to go into that industry. So you cannot blame that industry for not hiring enough of them. That's not the industry's fault. Women, on large, do not want to be involved in computer programming and developing new technology. It is what it is. Men and women have different interests, and therefore we're going to go into different fields as far as our professions go. And that's fine. Just because men and women are different does not mean that there is something wrong.
Yeah, feminists, they never complain about men not being in certain industries dominated by women. The one I've joked about is makeup industries, stores, perfume. You can go in there. The very few men you find are gay. And on planes, the air hostesses, they're all women usually. And again, men, they're gay usually.
For sure. I'm. Do you have Macy's in Britain?
I've heard of them, but I've never been.
But you don't have them. Okay, yeah, it's a kind of an upscale department store where they sell clothes and shoes and perfume and different, sunglasses, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
and I think I've walked through. I mean, I've that's where I regularly shop, and they don't have many men there. The men that are actually at the Macy's that I go to, the men are the security guards that keep people from stealing things. But there aren't actually men like working in the store. And it's like, well, they're clearly sexist against men. No, they're not. It just means that women are applying for those jobs and not men. I don't think I've gone to a Macy's and paid for my stuff at a cash register that was headed by a man. It's always been a woman. Now, does that mean that Macy's is sexist against men? No. I mean, that would be ridiculous. Like, men don't want that job and women do. You know, just because there are differences. And it's just like, I feel like I'm just kind of reiterating the same point. Just because men and women are different does not mean that there is something wrong.
Yeah, definitely. So, anything else to add on that? Oh, no, we didn't really go into the diversity memo so much. Do you want to refresh on that?
I'm sorry, what was that?
We didn't really go too much into detail on the memo itself.
Yeah, I did not read the memo itself. From what I understood was that he was kind of defending Silicon Valley and saying that the reason that there are fewer women in it was because there are fewer women applying for those jobs. And because he said that, he was deemed as sexist. And it's like, well, it's not sexist, that's reality. And there have been a number of social scientists who have confirmed that, sorry, that's the way it is. So, you know, I don't have a problem with sexism in the technology industry. I don't think it really exists. If it does, then that's completely hilarious to me, because the technology is overwhelmingly populated by people who applaud themselves for being liberals and for being non-sexists. So if they're the ones who are now being called sexist, that I find that completely hilarious.
Yeah, essentially what happened in the memo was, yeah, you were right. He was defending Silicon Valley, saying, you know, women aren't. I think he said some genders are more suited to particular roles,
right?
Particular job roles. You know, and that's true. You know, a woman, usually, of course, there's some. They're not going to be security guards as much. You know,
right?
There's
yeah,
some.
And that's just it. It's like, well, we're not saying that women can't be in these roles. We're saying that men overwhelmingly are more suited to these roles. Like, for some reason, and I'm not a parent, I don't know if you are, but I'm not a parent. And if I were to send my child to a daycare, I would be more comfortable if it were a woman than if it were a man. You know, like there's a certain part of me that thinks, like, if it's a guy who is in charge of a daycare, he's a perv. But if it's a woman who's in charge of a daycare, that's completely fine, you know.
Yeah.
But it turns out that more women are in charge of daycares than men, and there's nothing sexist about it. Different genders tend to gravitate towards roles in society that meet them, and like, again, people are different. Just because men and women are different doesn't mean that there's something wrong. Like, and it's actually a really good thing, because I would hate for my girlfriend to be like me. I don't want my girlfriend to act like me. That sounds awful, you know, like she looks like me. Ew. I'm not attracted to myself. I'm attracted to women. So it's a good thing that women are different than me, because otherwise I'd just never have offspring ever, and the world would be, you know, would see a huge loss because of that.
Yeah. So, do you have anything to end off on?
Not as far as the Google thing goes. No, I'm good on that front.
Anything you want to talk about?
Let's see. How long have we been going? I mean, I don't have anything scheduled for the rest of the day, but my glass is almost about empty. I've been drinking a Moscow Mule.
Oh, I've just got a can of Coke.
Oh, well, that's good too. Can't go wrong there.
Yeah.
Might want to throw some whiskey in with it. But no, I don't have anything in particular that I need to talk about.
No,
I am at your will. So any topic you want to throw at me, I am willing to give a good rant on.
just one last topic: the death penalty.
That's an interesting one. Do you have that in Britain?
We used to, but not anymore.
So it's been abolished?
Yeah, I think it was abolished in the early 60s.
Okay. As far as the death penalty goes, part of me views it as completely inhumane, and I think it's pretty effed up that someone would want to watch that, because there are people that go to this, and there's some people who administer it, and then there's an audience of people, and they're walled off from the actual execution itself, but people are injected with different chemicals and kind of things, and it puts them to sleep. And a lot of times it'll be members of the press, or it'll be members of the family of a victim kind of thing. And it's really weird. I think it draws on kind of the darker parts of human nature, revenge. And I have one brother, he's my only sibling, and if he were murdered tomorrow, I would feel horrible. I would certainly be grieving for a long time, but I don't know that I would want to watch someone be put down. I put my dog down. I hated putting my dog down because that was that was my pet. And, she had to be euthanized because she was just sick and we couldn't keep her alive anymore. So we put her down, and I was with her when she died. That was bad enough. I don't know that I actually want to watch a human being die. You can watch it die in a movie, but actually physically watching someone die, it's a really messed up kind of thing. On the other hand, do people have a right to life? People do have a right to life as long as they don't violate someone else's right to life. So I'm not going to kill you as long as you don't kill me. But if you kill me, then the state or the government or the society, you no longer have a right to life because you violated mine. And that's the way it kind of goes. So by a very strict definition, I'd say I'm okay with it. I don't like it, but there are a lot of things about human nature that I don't like. So I wish we didn't have to put people down, because I wish we didn't have people who were worthy of being put down. That doesn't mean that I want to keep serial killers alive. And the problem we have in America is that it actually costs more to put people down than it does to just house them, which is a complete scam. I think I can buy a bullet for, 50 cents and I can put them down myself. Especially some of these guys who are serial child rapists and stuff like that. If you have too much, if it's going to cost too much to put them down, just call me up, ring me on the telly, and I will come over there with a gun and I'll put him down myself, and it'll cost you nothing because I'll do it voluntarily. I think that's how we should treat some kinds of people. As far, but I don't have a super strong stance one way or the other on the death penalty. It's definitely gruesome. It's something I'm not comfortable with, but I understand why it exists.
Well, I'd say I'm very, very strong on it. I hold a very conservative standpoint. That being, if you killed someone and they know it's you, definitely, there's footage of you killing that person, or impeccable DNA, then yes, you should be killed. We don't need you. And this argument that liberals give about, oh, the drugs cost too much, shut up. A bullet and a gun. Well, you can buy a gun for what, like $500? I think.
Yeah, less than that.
A pistol. Yeah, I know you can buy pistols at Walmart, can't you?
In some states, it depends on the Walmart you go to. Different Walmarts are different, but yeah, you can buy a gun for next to nothing. You can buy a bullet for next to nothing. So we could put these people down. If they say it costs too much to execute them, that's bullshit. It doesn't cost that much to kill someone. If that were the case, then all of the the drug dealers and the gang members in America would be very rich people because they're killing thousands of people in America every day, and it's so it doesn't cost a lot to kill someone. It does not cost a lot to kill someone.
Yeah.
Even if you wanted a hit job. Even if you wanted a hit job, I mean, I can go on the dark web, and if you go into the dark web, you can order hitmen. You might have to pay a few $1,000s, but a few $1,000s is nothing. Like, I can have some guy who will fly over to wherever a person is, and he will kill them, and then he'll get the rest of his money, and it costs a few grand. Like, it's kind of insane when we think about like how crazy the world is. Like, they say, oh, well, it costs so much to execute someone. How can it possibly cost so much to execute someone when I can order a hitman on the dark web and it'll cost me $5,000? How can it possibly cost, $100,000 for the government to do it? Oh, wait, there we go. It costs hundreds of thousands of dollars for the government to execute people, but it costs me $5,000 to hire a hitman. There you go. Government sucks. Government is more expensive. It takes longer. It's less effective. And there's my argument against government in the first, altogether.
I just see no point to using those drugs. Why do it? A bullet and a gun is quicker. It's probably not very painful, to be honest, because it's so quick.
Yep.
I think drugs aren't as painful because it's just like falling asleep. Although there's been cases where people have, started suffocating and stuff. But that's very rare.
Yeah, it's rare that they'll botch it, and sometimes they do, but I don't know if there's ever been a case of them botching a firing squad. So
that's very difficult to do.
Right. Like, how do you mess that up?
Yeah. Well, look, there's been people shot in the eye before and they survived, but still, you could just shoot them twice.
Shoot them twice. I mean, like, what's the big? And if they're a bad enough person where they really need to be killed, we're just like, this person deserves to die, and there are definitely people like that out in the world.
Yeah.
If that's the case, I'm sure you'll find a volunteer to go up right behind their head and just have them kneel on the ground, and someone will blow their brains out. There will be a volunteer. We have a lot of freaking whack jobs in America that are perfectly comfortable with doing that. I'm sure we could find a volunteer to kill people. We have people in America that eat other people, so I'm sure we could find a volunteer to put down child rapists.
Yeah. If I had my way in the world, I would actually ask the victims if they were happy, not the victim's family. Obviously, if you've been murdered, you can't do it yourself. But the families, if they were happy to do it, I'd say, yeah, go ahead. If they weren't, then I'd probably just get a random person, as you said, to do it. Prison guards.
If I were a victim or a member of the victim's family, it would be hard for me to do it just because of so much emotion is kind of wrapped into the whole thing. But and even if I wasn't wrapped into it, it would be hard for me personally to kill someone, even if they were a really bad person. It would just be hard to do, but I'm okay. If someone else wants to do it, then let them do it, and it'll cost us next to nothing, and we can, get these people off our dime, because as long as they're in prison, they're costing us money. Like, the taxpayers have to pay to feed them and house them, and we have to pay for the salaries of all the prison guards, and we have to pay for their electricity bills and all of these things.
Luxuries. Yeah, they have TVs, don't they? In their prison cells. I think some prisons do.
Yeah, I mean, it's and part of that, even the prison system is a giant racket, right?
Yeah.
Like, though in America. Our most populated state, California, recently legalized the recreational use of marijuana. You know who the number one opposing group was for that as far as donations. It was the prison guards union. Like, the prison guards want more and more and more prisoners so that they can keep their jobs and keep building new prisons. And there's a prison industrial complex that advocates for laws that puts nonviolent people into jail. And it's just it's a giant scam. Luckily, you know, the people of California are legalizing nonviolent use of certain kinds of things.
Yeah, but we're probably going to branch off a little bit. But drugs, what's your opinion on that? You know.
Well, me personally, I'm not a user of anything other than alcohol, really. But that's legal for most of the world. Marijuana, I don't really care. If someone wants to smoke a joint in their own house, then it doesn't affect me. The kind of linchpin for the drug argument is, if we're going to legalize drugs, we also have to get rid of the welfare state. Yeah. So I'm completely in favor of legalizing cocaine, legalizing heroin, legalizing methamphetamines, legalizing everything. Let people do whatever they want to do. But at the same time, I don't want them saying, hey, government, get me rehab. Because that's the government taking from me, a responsible citizen who didn't take drugs. Now I have to pay for an irresponsible person who did, and I have to get them fixed, you know, through rehab. So in a purely free society, which is my ideal, all drugs would be legal and you can do whatever you want. And honestly, like, the dumb people that think that heroin is a good idea, they kill themselves off, and we'd have a lot more natural selection. I think natural selection has been, like, stunted by government. Government has made it easier to be stupid and be alive. If we didn't have this giant welfare state taking care of all of the stupid people, then then all the stupid people would die off because they'd be too dumb to stay alive on their own. So, you know, legalize drugs, end the welfare state, and I think we live in a more prosperous and free and a better society.
I tend to agree, but maybe not for the right, or I don't know, not the same reasons. It's going to sound very radical, this, but if I had my way, I'd legalize it all, because I just think, if you want to take heroin, fuck you. You can get yourself killed. I don't care. You know, in a few years, you know, the legal, because people take drugs because it's illegal. You know, it's an illegal buzz they get from it. Well, if it's legal,
true,
there's no illegal buzz, so the next generation wouldn't even take it. So, you know, problem sorted right there.
Right, and that they actually proved that in Amsterdam when they first legalized marijuana, the recreational use of marijuana. For a few years, it actually spiked and it went up. But after a few years, it actually went down for the citizens of Amsterdam. And it shows that people are actually more likely to use it when it's illegal than when it's legal. Like, it's been proven time and time over again. And I mean, even just like, again, we kind of have to say, well, let's take these laws back to like a personal level. If they legalized heroin in America today, I'm still not going to use heroin. Even if it was legal, I wouldn't do it. And I don't think that there's anyone in America who uses heroin, or anyone who wants to, who has said, well, I want to use heroin, but the reason I don't is because it's illegal. Like, if you want to use heroin in America, you can find heroin and you'll use it. Like, it's pretty dang easy. The law has no effect on it. All the law does is it takes people who are victims of drug addiction and it puts them in prison so that other people can profit off of them. And it's a horrific system, but it has nothing to do with actually drugs or addiction or anything like that. Complete nonsense.
Yeah. So I think that's all we've got. We've gone through everything.
All right.
It's been great talking to you.
Yeah, you as well. Thanks for having me.
Oh, that's all right. Right, so thank you everyone for watching. Tune in Saturday because we have David Vance on. And Sunday, because we have Barbara 402C on. And stay tuned for that. You want to say bye? Yeah.
Goodbye. Yeah, if folks want to hear me rant more and more and more,
Yeah.
you can go to Preusspodcast.com, PREUSS podcast.com. I'm on iTunes and Stitcher, and nationally syndicated on Talk America Radio and the Liberty Radio Network, which actually gets us pretty much around the entire world with satellite radio. So we're doing well, and hope folks that listen to you will tune in and listen to me as well.
All right. Make sure you check Tim out. And that's it. Bye, everyone.